Objection.
Ask unanimous consent to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection.
I wanted to spend a minute. We've had a lot of discussions over the pain that's being caused by the American traveling public and business on the FAA. and we heard the majority leader say we couldn't do the sequester because we still have the same amount of money and that there's no way we could cut the $40 billion over the next 6 months out of our budget. So I thought I'd just draw a little comparison for us so we could actually see what the federal budget is. And then we'd make a comparison to the average family budget. And here's the federal budget. This is last year's federal budget. We spent $3.7 trillion. We took in $2.46 trillion. We had a deficit of $1.32 trillion. We added to our total debt, so we've come to a total debt now of $17.57 trillion. And the sequester cuts are $85 billion. $85 billion sounds like a lot of money. Now let's compare it to the average family household in America. The median household income in America last year is $53,000. By the way, in real dollars, that's less than what it was in 1989. Less than what it was in 1989. The total spending, if we spent money in our household the way the federal government spends money, we would have spent $81,000. We would have only earned $53,000, but we would have spent $81,000. And we would have had an annual credit card debt that we would have chalked up of $28,000, doing exactly what the federal government does, which would have made our total credit card debt $375,000. Now, we're spending $81,000, and if we cut the amount of spending in the sequester as a percentage of the total federal budget as to the median family income in America, we would have cut $182. That kind of puts it in perspective. How many families would continue to be able to operate this way? They wouldn't. No credit card company would continue to give them $28,000 worth of credit card debt. They certainly wouldn't let them run up $375,000 and then say, oh, by the way, what are you doing about getting your finances? I'm cutting $182 out of my budget this next year. So what we're seeing is a farce when we talk about we can't cut $44 billion or $88 billion out of the federal budget over a year's period. It's an absolute farce. And then when you talk about the FAA, in fact, they have less controllers now than they did in 2010. And if you look at the budget request in 2013, there's about a $300 million difference between the sequester level and where they were in 2000. Actually, it's the same as in 2010. And so what the FAA and the administration is telling us is there's no way that they can possibly do anything to associate less inconvenience and less delayed flights. Yesterday, there were 6,800 flights delayed to make it hurt. And I want to enter into the record that something came up on my whistleblower website. This is from an employee of the FAA, what they were told in a meeting on Monday by management, and here's what they were told. I'm going to read it. I hope this is the appropriate channel to contact you through. I'm not going to say who works for the FAA. Asked me to email you. We want to let you know that the FAA management has stated in meetings that they need to make the furloughs as hard as possible for the public so that they understand how serious it is. Due to this, there is management trying to make everyone take the same furlough day so that the FAA shuts down completely on that day. Union employees are supposed to be able to pick their furlough day, but are being pushed by management to take the same day as everyone else. Example, recently there was a meeting between, and I'm not going to say which group of employees, but at the FAA, management and the union, where the union reminded the manager of the FAA that he cannot force them to take off the same day. A union employee may want off Wednesday, so another employee under the manager's orders tried to make the union employee change his mind. When the union employee asked why, the other employee said, to prove a point. I do not know if any of this information is useful or not. If so, I will contact you with more if it is. Well, the fact is that's really going on, that the management of FAA is trying to make union employees all take the same day off. What is that about? Is that about airline travel in America, or is that trying to make the sequester hurt? Is that about $182? $182 out of your budget? That we can't even do that? And we have I'd like to submit this, a unanimous consent to submit this. This is a contrived farce to make the American people think we can't cut $182 to the country, not the best interest of any political party or political philosophy, to actually accomplish this. I must say I'm disappointed in the Department of Transportation. I'm disappointed in the FAA that they would be so callous as to carry this forward. The remarks of the party leader 2 days ago about the Tea Party. I have to say I adamantly disagree. The Tea Party people I know from Oklahoma and the Midwest, they want government. They want a government that follows the Constitution. He related and compared them to. Are there some crazy opinions on both sides of the extremes in both parties? You bet. But the vast majority of people in America understand over the full thing to even make the comparison, but it's also made out of ignorance. Everybody in this country really wants the best in the long term. There's a difference in our view on how we get there, but there is no difference that we do have a Constitution. And it is not un-American to think that we ought to honor our oath to that Constitution, that we ought to truly follow the Bill of Rights and not pass laws that abandon it, that we truly ought to embrace the enumerated powers. For you see, the GAO over the last 3 years has shown us where $250 billion a year in waste is, and yet the Congress has done nothing on it. Senator Feinstein and I eliminated $6 billion a year in terms of the ethanol blenders credit. That's the only thing that's gone through in 3 years that even comes close to addressing what the GAO has recommended out of $250 billion. So you can understand why people might be cynical of Washington is because we don't have our nose pointed in the right direction. We continue to pass laws that ignore the enumerated powers. And one of the results of that is $250 billion worth of duplicative programs, which have no true metrics on them. If they were all working, that'd be fine. But in fact, most aren't. And so I think it needs to be countered that there's a lot of disparate views in our country. But the motivation behind it is really love of country. Whether you're on the hard left or the hard right, it's just a different path. And to compare that group of people to anarchists is both insensitive, inaccurate, and outrageous. What we need in our country today is leadership that pulls us together, not leadership that divides us further. And what we're seeing is just the opposite of that. So I'd ask my fellow Americans, if you think that on a comparative basis that we couldn't cut $182 out of an $81,000 budget, and is that too much? especially since the fact that this budget has grown 89% in the last 10 years while your income's gone down 5%. Which is the better way to go? Should we raise your taxes and spend more of your money? Or should we actually decrease and eliminate tremendous amounts of wasteful, ineffective, and inefficient government spending and not sacrifice the future of our children? I don't think the answer is complicated. I think most of America would agree with it, that we could get $182 out of $81,000. That's the comparative ratio of $85 billion out of $3.7 trillion. And what we heard the majority leader say that that's impossible to do. It's only impossible to do is because we don't want to do it. I've spent 8 years outlining waste in the federal government. Very few of my colleagues have helped eliminate that waste. And the reason is they're double-minded. In their hearts, they want the best for the country, but they also want to get reelected. And every one of those duplicative, wasteful programs have a constituency. And so parochialism trumps patriotism in the U.S. Senate. That's the only explanation for why we haven't addressed what the GA plainly said is duplication, waste, and actual stupidity. You know, when we have over 100 job training programs, 47 for the non-disabled, and all but 3 of them do exactly the same thing, and most of those don't have a metric. As a matter of fact, none of them have a metric to say whether they're effective, and we won't reform it. We're saying we don't care. We can't cut $182. When we have 110 teacher training programs, and none of those have a metric across 9 different agencies, not in the Department of Education, and none of those have a metric, and we spend about $4 billion a year on them, and we don't know if they're effective, and we won't confirm them into one, even if it is a role for the federal government, or into 2, and eliminate and get some consolidated say. What we're saying is, we can't cut $182 out of an $81,000 budget. You see, the problems aren't insolvable. What they are is no attempt is being made to solve them. So we get a choice. America gets a choice. Continue to operate as we are, and what we're actually going to do is put handcuffs on our children and shackle their legs and take away the opportunity of a life equal to ours. We're stealing that from them. And when we have the majority leader of the Senate say it's impossible for us to cut $182 out of $81,000 budget, what we're saying is our priorities are wrong. And I can go through the list. We've got 204 science, technology, engineering, and math programs. 21 different agencies run those. Half of them are at the Defense Department. None of them have a metric to see if they're working. They're well intended. Why do we have 204 science, technology? Nobody can answer that question. We just